New evidence found by BBC News casts further doubt on the Greek Coast Guard's version of events surrounding last month's deadly migrant boat sinking, in which up to 600 people died. 2 survivors have described how the Coast Guard pressed them to identify 9 Egyptians on board as traffickers. The new video of the overcrowded boat foundering at sea also challenges the Greek Coast Guard's account. It was taken when the boat was said to be on a steady course. BBC Verify has confirmed the footage was filmed when the Coast Guard claimed the boat was not in need of rescue, and was in fact filmed by the Coast Guard itself. We have also confirmed that the larger vessel in the background is the oil tanker Faithful Warrior, which had been asked to give supplies to the migrant boat. The official Greek Coast Guard account had already been challenged in a BBC Verify report, but now we have seen court documents which show serious discrepancies between survivors' witness statements taken by the Coast Guards and the in-person evidence later presented to a judge. A translator has also come forward with his account of a people smuggling investigation last year after another group of migrants were rescued by the Coast Guard. He describes how witnesses from that incident were intimidated by the Coast Guard. The legal case collapsed before it could reach trial. The revelations raise fresh questions about how the Greek authorities handle such disasters. Both the Greek Coast Guard and Greek government did not comment and declined our request for interview. Survivors silenced and intimidated. Soon after the 14 June sinking, 9 Egyptian men were detained and charged with manslaughter and people smuggling. But 2 survivors of the disaster say migrants were silenced and intimidated by Greek authorities, after suggesting the Coast Guards may have been to blame for the tragedy. For the past month, allegations have been made that the Coast Guard used a rope to tow the fishing vessel, causing it to sink. The 2 survivors we spoke to in Athens, who we are calling Ahmed and Musab to protect their identities, say that is what happened. They attached a rope from the left. Everyone moved to the right side of our boat to balance it, says Musab. The Greek vessel moved off quickly, causing our boat to flip. They kept dragging it for quite a distance. The men described how they spent 2 hours in the water before being picked up by the Coast Guard. When I asked how they knew it was that amount of time, Musab says his watch was still working, so he could tell. Once on land, in Kalamata, they claim the Coast Guard told survivors to shut up when they started to talk about how the Greek authorities had caused the disaster. When people replied by saying the Greek Coast Guard was the cause, the official in charge of the questioning asked the interpreter to tell the interviewee to stop talking. Says Ahmad. Ahmad says those rescued were told to be grateful they hadn't died. He says there were shouts of, "You have survived death. Stop talking about the incident. Don't ask more questions about it." The men say they are scared to speak out publicly because they fear they too will be accused like the Egyptians. If there was a fair system in place, we would contribute to this case, says Ahmad. The men told us they had both paid $4,500 PS3 $480 for a spot on the boat. Maud's younger brother was also on board. He is still missing. Collapsing court cases, as well as this testimony given to us by survivors, we have seen court documents which raise questions about the way evidence is being gathered to be presented in court. In initial statements from 5 survivors, none mentioned the Coast Guard trying to tow the migrant vessel with a rope. But days later, in front of a judge, all explained that there had been a failed attempt to tow it. The Greek Coast Guard initially denied using a rope, but later backtracked, admitting one had been used. But it said it was only to try to board the vessel and assess the situation. It said this was at least 2 hours before the fishing vessel capsized. 82 people are confirmed dead in the sinking, but the United Nations estimates as many as 500 more lost their lives. The Greek authorities say the charged Egyptian men are part of a smuggling ring and were identified by fellow passengers. They face up to life imprisonment if found guilty. Some survivors allege some of the 9 suspects mistreated those on board, while other testimony says some were actually trying to help. But Ahmed and Musab told us the Coast Guard had instructed all of the survivors to say that the 9 Egyptian men were to blame for trafficking them. They were imprisoned and were wrongly accused by the Greek authorities as an attempt to cover their crime, says Musab. A Greek Supreme Criminal Court deputy prosecutor is carrying out an investigation. but calls, including from the UNW, for an international independent inquiry have so far been ignored. The European Commission has indicated it has faith in Greek investigation, but Ahmad and Muzab are not alone in their concerns about the Greek Coast Guard. When the 9 Egyptian men were arrested in the hours after the shipwreck, it was widely reported as an example of efficient detective work by the Greek authorities. But for Farzin Kavand, it rang alarm bells. He feared history was repeating itself. He says he witnessed Greek Coast Guards put 2 innocent Iranian men in the frame for people smuggling last year, following the rescue of 32 migrants whose boat had got into trouble crossing from Turkey. Mr. Havand, a UK citizen who speaks Farsi and has lived in the Kalamata area for 20 years, acted as a translator during the Coast Guard's investigation into what happened then. He says the migrants, 28 from Afghanistan and 4 from Iran, explained that they had set off from Turkey and been at sea for 8 days before being rescued. During this time, the Greek Coast Guard had approached the boat. Before leaving, he was told 2 Arabic-speaking men had abandoned the boat after the engine blew up. Mr. Cavan was told by the Afghan migrants. They said that most people on board had taken turns to try to steer the stricken boat to safety, including the 2 accused Iranians who had paid to be on board like everyone else. The Iranian men were highly traumatized. Mr. Cavan said, "They were repeating to me that they'd never even seen an ocean before they set off in Turkey. And they kept being told they were the captain, and they said, 'We know nothing about the boat. We can't even swim.'" One of the 2 accused, a man called Sayed, who was facing a long prison sentence, had been rescued with his young son, explained Mr. Cavand. I asked him, "Why did you take a 6-year-old child on a boat?" And he said, "The smugglers told us it's only 2 hours' journey." Mr. Cavan relayed their accounts to the Coast Guard exactly as it had been told to him, but he says when he saw the transcripts, the Afghans' testimony had changed. He fears they altered their stories after pressure from the Greek authorities.